doing things a little bit differently this morning because it's Palm Sunday. Boys and girls, this is normally the time when I ask you to come up and be with me or Father Sandy or Deacon Dorothy up front, but I'd like you to stay where you are right now because the story is very sad and we like to hear it together. And I don't want to have my back to you all quite so much. So if I seem like I'm forgetting you, will you clear your throats like this? Okay? They gave Jesus a parade. They gave him a parade. They heard that he was coming to Jerusalem. And there were so many people coming to Jerusalem that week anyway because of the Passover that a whole group of them went outside the city gates to welcome him as he was coming through. And they got so excited. Everybody wanted to see Jesus. They'd heard about him. A lot of them had heard about them. Some of them had actually seen him. And some of the stories, well, even the boys and girls knew these stories, right? First, there was the man who couldn't see, and Jesus came and made it so his eyes worked again so he could see. Then there was another man who couldn't hear. He was deaf, and Jesus put his hands over that man's ears so that he could hear. And then there was another person who couldn't walk, who could walk again after Jesus came. There was even a story about a group of them who'd been out on a boat in the middle of a huge lake. I mean, like a miles-long lake. And the waves had come up, and there was thunder and lightning, and the boat was pitching from one side to the other. And here's what the story said. They said Jesus stood up in the boat, in the storm, and just said, shh. And the storm died down. And that's not even the most fantastic story they told about Jesus. They told another story, that there was a man who died. His name was Lazarus. He had two sisters, a sister named Mary and a sister named Martha. They were all good friends of Jesus. Lazarus died when Jesus was off working and preaching and talking somewhere. Mary and Martha got very upset and asked Jesus to come. But by the time he got there, Lazarus had already died and was already wrapped in a burial cloth and laid in a tomb. Jesus went to the door of the tomb and said, Lazarus, come out. And he did. So there was a story that Jesus had raised a man from the dead. No kidding. So if this guy was coming to town, raise your hand if you'd like to at least see him, right? Yeah. And especially if you'd seen him once already, or maybe you were one of the people he helped, you'd kind of want him to see you, wouldn't you? So what do? You get yourself a big piece of palm and you wave it, and maybe you have to stand on tiptoe. Jesus, over here, because there was a crowd. And of course, when he came, they had to cheer. Now, when we cheer, what do? We say, yay, right? We'd be saying, yay, Jesus. They used another word. Who remembers the word they used? Yeah, what was the word? Hosanna. Yeah, can you say that with me really loud like we did before? Hosanna. That wasn't very loud. Hosanna. One more. Hosanna. All right. It was like, hey, Jesus. Hosanna! They were so happy. He was coming to Jerusalem. And so he came, and they were all cheering and clapping and waving their palms. It was such a great day. Jesus is here. It's a parade. You love a parade. And then the sound died down, and when Jesus got to the gates of the city, he started to cry. Now, we don't know if did he cry because he was so moved, he was so happy. Here were all these people who loved him and they were cheering. But the gospel teller, the storyteller says actually when he got to the gates of Jerusalem, he cried because he knew that Jerusalem was going to be a very sad place. A very sad place, a place where there would be a lot of fighting, a lot of bad things were about to happen. Okay, that was Sunday. Everybody was cheering. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. By the time they got to Thursday, the people who didn't think Jesus was such a big deal or such a good thing were beginning to talk a lot more. They said, "Look how popular he is. Is that a problem? He's been healing people, but he's not a doctor, and he doesn't have a license. Is that a problem? He's been teaching in the temple, and he actually contradicts the things that some of us are teaching. Don't you think that's a problem? And he's coming to Jerusalem during the Passover. The streets are going to be full of people. It could stir up a riot, and that would be a problem. It would also be a problem because Jerusalem was a city of the Jewish people, but it wasn't really being ruled by the Jewish people. It was being ruled by the Roman Empire and this man named Pilate who kind of had his thumb on Herod the king. And Jesus was saying he was a king. Or was he? They couldn't get it straight. Did he say he was a king? Did other people say he was a king? Well, what was all that business with the palms and the cheering? And did you notice he came into town on a donkey, which is something a king is supposed to do? So they were getting worried. The rule makers and the police and the authorities were saying, I don't know. We need to do something about this. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you say the story, there was one of his close friends, Judas, who was having some questions of his own. Somebody offered him some money. Say, can you help us take Jesus away? We'd like to take Jesus away. So when Jesus had a supper with his disciples and went to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray on Thursday night, Judas came with the soldiers and kissed Jesus on the cheek as a way of saying, that's your guy. Well, the disciples who were with Jesus just, oh God. One of them grabbed a sword and lopped off the ear of one of the soldiers, and Jesus said, no swords. Picked the ear up and put it back on. Those who live by the sword will die by the sword, said Jesus. We're not doing that. Don't try to beat the soldiers who are taking me away. They bound his hands with a rope, just like handcuffs. They led him away to a judge. He was sentenced. They took him, they beat him with a fist and with a whip. They took his clothes away. They put a beautiful robe on him. And because people had said he was a king, they made a crown of sharp, pointy thorns and pressed it down into his head. And then they made fun of him some more. They took the clothes, they put a cross, a big, heavy wooden cross on his back and made him carry it until he couldn't anymore. And then they made someone else carry it for him. They took him up a hill and they nailed his arms and his feet to the cross and waited for him to die. In 3 hours, he died. It was so sad. Some people say the sun refused to shine when he died. Some people say there was a hilltop in Wales that opened up just like that. Some people said there was an earthquake in Jerusalem. Some people said that the cloth that separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple in Jerusalem was suddenly torn in two all by itself. And the people who stood at the cross were very, very sad. They were very, very sad. They went home. One of them went to Pilate, the Roman who had ordered Jesus to be killed, and asked if it would be okay to take his body down from the cross. And so very gently they took his body and they wrapped it in a linen cloth and they laid it in a tomb, which is sort of like a cave in the side of a hill, and they rolled a stone in front of the door. That's the saddest part of the story, and we get to that part on Friday. This week, every day, we'll think about what happened to Jesus. We'll think a lot about the people who were around him and wonder what it was that made Judas turn him over, or made Peter say he didn't even know who he was. You should listen for that part of the story later. The people who turned against him, or the people who cried out that he should be crucified, or the people who made fun of them, what was going on with them? We'll try to remember, or to know, or to imagine what was going on with them, because it might help us learn something about ourselves. We all hope we would do better if we were there. So we'll bring our prayers. As many of you as can will come here Thursday night for Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and then on Sunday, the Feast of the Resurrection, we'll hear the happy ending to the story. You know there's a happy ending, right? You do? Is there anybody here that doesn't know there's a happy ending? I don't want to do the spoiler thing here. So here's the thing about Palm Sunday. We start out really happy and joyous and loud, and then it's like traveling together, very slowly together, down a hill to a place that's quiet and sad, where we can think a little about our lives and about Jesus and how we'd like to be closer to God. You can do that, right?